Hello, grade 12s. Welcome to today's lesson. It's economics with Ms. Piwe. And today we are focusing on economic growth and development. We know that this is a very important section because in the previous lessons, we have been looking at ways to improve economic growth and development. And now finally, we are actually talking about the actual economic growth and development. So it's important that we understand that as a country, we need to increase the capacity of economic activity in order to achieve economic growth. Also, government has policies in place to ensure that this objective is achieved in terms of ensuring that there is an increase in economic activity as well. So without wasting any time, let's get started. All right, so we are looking at economic growth and development. You know, often people confuse these two concepts, economic growth and development. So I thought it would be good to start off by just showing you the difference between economic growth and development, so that when you use these two concepts in your essay discussions, that you use them accordingly and you do not confuse them. So we are looking at economic growth and development. Right, me as a typical teacher, I need to underline the heading. So there we go. And then now we are going to focus on the difference between economic growth and economic development. So I think understanding what growth is and also understanding what development is. So what are the differences? So we have a table over here that's going to assist us in understanding the difference between economic growth and also economic development as well. So starting off with economic growth over here, so we know it is an increase in a country's real gross domestic product, that is the GDP. So when there's an increase in the GDP, we consider that to be economic growth. In order for us to get this increase in the GDP, there must be an increase in the capacity of the economy, meaning that there should be more economic activity happening so that we are producing more as a country, we are exporting more as a country in order to grow our economy. So GDP is linked to economic growth based on the economic activity that has been happening in the country. So it is measured by the increase in production of goods and services over time. So it is calculated over a specific period of time, and it focuses on the production of goods and services. So when there's an increase in production, that means that there is more economic activity happening in the country, which then results to the increase in the production of goods and services. So this means that the households have more disposable income that they can use in order to purchase their consumer goods and services, which is a good thing. Remember that relationship that we spoke about in lesson 1 between production, spending, and income. In order for production to take place, spending needs to happen. Basic resources need to be purchased in order to ensure that production starts. And then also income needs to be paid to the households for selling their factors of production to the firms or to the businesses. So there is always a relationship between production, spending, and income. So that is a definition of what economic growth is. So think of the GDP. So when there's an increase in production, that means that our economy is growing. But then what is economic development? So here the focus is on development, and for development to be achieved, policies need to be put into place, or structures need to be developed in order to ensure that development actually takes place. So this is an increase in a country's real gross domestic product, but then the focus here is per capita over time. So we're just focusing on the real gross domestic product, but then here the focus is that you have this increase, but it is worked out per capita over a period of time. A process that concentrates on people's standards of living, self-respect, and freedom of choice. Okay, so when we see that, you know, the lifestyle of people or of South Africans is improving, their access to basic resources is improving, then we call that economic development, that there is a development that is happening in ensuring that the lifestyle or the standard of living is improved in our country. But most importantly, the freedom of choice. Hence, we looked at the market structures when we looked at perfect competition, the market forces of demand and supply, because they are very important in ensuring that there is that freedom of choice and that we don't have just firms that are made up of a monopoly structure where they influence pricing, they hike up prices because they want to hike up their profits. So all of that would need to be taken into consideration when looking at economic development. So growth should lead to development. So you first need to have the growth, and then when you have the economic growth happening, that would lead to economic development. So you can't have the development if you haven't achieved the growth itself, making sure that you increase the production activities that happen in a country. If you do that, then your GDP will increase, resulting in economic growth. As soon as you have economic growth, then you can say, well, now we can start looking at economic development. So it's important that you understand these two concepts because they're very important. And I find them that they are overused in economics, but in most cases they are used in the wrong context because students often confuse them. So remember that you first must achieve growth before you achieve economic development. All right, so moving on. Now we're going to start off with the demand side approach in terms of growth and development because now we are looking at the role of market forces into this concept of growth and development. So what is the role of demand in all of this? So we're going to start off with a demand side approach that can be used in order to achieve growth and development in our country. So a demand side approach includes discretionary changes in monetary and fiscal policies with the aim of changing the level of aggregate demand. So here, government intervention plays an important role because we know that government can intervene by using its monetary policies and also its fiscal policies in order to influence the level of aggregate demand. So now you're looking at the role that government is playing in terms of economic growth and development. And we know that for government to participate in economic activity, they need to do that via their policies that they have in terms of what influence they can bring in the market forces when we are looking at demand and supply. So we know that they can use their monetary and fiscal policies in order to influence the market forces of supply and demand. But in this particular instance, we are looking at demand, so how they can influence the level of aggregate demand using the monetary and fiscal policies, because we know that that's the way that they intervene in the circular flow. The monetary policy is driven by the South African Reserve Bank. So we spent a lesson just looking over monetary policies. I will bring them in again in this lesson because now we need to look at them from an angle of economic growth and development. But we know that the Reserve Bank is quite influential when it comes to the monetary policy or policies of our country. There's even a committee that ensures that these are monitored and implemented effectively. So the Reserve Bank does play an important role in terms of implementing monetary policies in our country. So the aim of a monetary policy is to stabilize prices and also to manage the inflation. We know that our country is very good at this, managing the inflation rate. So over the past couple of years, we have done this so well because we have policies in place that ensure that our inflation rate is controlled and it doesn't go above the target that's been set by the South African Reserve Bank. So they look at prices because if you control your prices, then you're in a position to control your inflation, because we know that inflation is a general or considerable rise in prices. But then if you have policies that support your inflation control strategy, then they will help you to manage the prices as well. So we know that the Reserve Bank plays an important role in that regard. And then in terms of fiscal policy, So fiscal policy is driven by the Department of Finance. It aims to facilitate government political and economic objectives. So you've got the finance department. Obviously, you have a minister of finance who's appointed to lead that department, and then he will have several structures underneath him that would assist him in achieving government objectives, but also political objectives, including economic objectives. So it's quite a broad department that looks at these three structures that need to be supported. And in order for this to happen, different structures or committees have been formed in order to ensure that they carry out the mandate in the different departments in terms of government, political and economic objectives, because these three disciplines are somehow interrelated. You can't talk the world of economics without talking politics, and government is always involved based on the secular flow model, that government plays an important role to regulate the markets and all that. So there is an interrelationship between the government, the politics, and also the world of economics as well. So a demand-side approach to economic growth and development does not only depend on fiscal and monetary policy, it is dependent on all the components of aggregate demand, that is C, I, X, and G. Okay, so now we go back to the secular flow. When we're looking at investments, we were looking at government expenditure, and so on. So that is important. Hence, when we started with our first lesson, when we looked at the structure of the economy and focusing on the secular flow model, I said to you, don't just look at the secular flow in isolation, but bring it to the next topic and the following topic and the next topic and so on, because economics is all about piecing together the puzzle. You can't just say, well, I've figured this piece out, so I'm going to chuck it out. No, now you have to bring it in order to solve the problem of the next piece or puzzle. So it's important to bring in the secular flow model, because, government doesn't just use the fiscal and monetary policy in order to manage the demand-side approach, but the expenditure and the investments and the government spending also does come in the equation of managing the demand-side approach when looking at economic growth and development. So what is the South African approach? Because each and every country has its own approach in terms of economic growth and development, because you can't use what's been used in the UK or in France, because in terms of social class, our countries are very different. Others fall under First World War countries. Others are considered to be part of the developing countries. So we need a specific South African approach in order to deal or maintain or put structures together in order to achieve our economic goals in terms of economic growth and development. So we need to have a customized approach as a country that we are going to follow in order to ensure that we achieve economic growth and development. So what is the South African approach? So the South African approach uses both monetary and fiscal measures to influence aggregate demand in the economy. Okay, so we use a combination. Like I said in the previous lesson, that it's always good to use the combination of the monetary and fiscal policies, because there are certain good elements that you want to take out of the monetary policy, and there are also good elements that you want to take out of your fiscal policy. So a combination of these two policies results in a more suitable policy that we as a country can implement in order to achieve economic growth and development. So it's important that we design our own approach that is suited to our country and to our needs in terms of our economy. And also remember that we are a developing country. We have a very complicated structure, because certain features of our economy resemble a first world country, but we are still dealing with issues like poverty and unemployment, which are associated with the third world and developing countries. So do consider that when discussing this approach. Okay, moving on. So, like I said earlier on, we were going to go and revisit the monetary policy and just understand what it is. And then we know that the Reserve Bank is responsible in terms of implementing and monitoring the monetary policy. So, the South African Reserve Bank, as the central bank, so remember, the Reserve Bank is the central bank in South Africa. So, they formulate the monetary policy using the following instruments. Okay. So just a bit of revision because we have done these, but I thought, no, let's bring them in again in this discussion because now we are focusing on growth and development. Starting off with the interest rate changes. So it is used to influence the credit creation by making credit more expensive or cheaper. The exchange rate is stabilized by encouraging inflow or outflows. Okay, so we know that if the interest rates are high, then people are skeptical to go to the banks to take out loans because you know that you'll be paying a bit more extra if the interest rates are high. So you're going to say, hang on, maybe I should wait a bit and not renovate my house now or buy that new car until the interest rates drop again. So when the central bank decides to drop the interest rate, it's because they want to encourage more economic growth to happen or create a credit creation as such, because they want to encourage people to actually go and take out a loan, go and buy that car and pay it in monthly installments. So they design the system in a way that if they decide to discourage people, they can use it. But also if they decide, we want to encourage people to go out there and access the credit facilities, then they will drop the interest rates. It does make sense, guys, because imagine if you want to take a loan, you've been wanting to go to that wonderful destination after your matric exams. If the interest rates are high, you're going to say, maybe I should go in Feb. Maybe they will drop them, after the December festivities or whatsoever, or after the Easter holidays, and then you will go. Because if there's a holiday season around the time, they tend to increase the interest rates in order to discourage spending. So that might not be the good time to actually go out there and make that loan. But if the interest rates have been dropped, then credit is more affordable, and government uses that to encourage people to go and spend more and take out that loan. So before we continue with our lesson, let's take a short break and I will see you right after this.